Bill Maher, Mr. Bill Do Nothing Maher, had a moment of self-reflection where he questioned the state of the climate crisis. Now, keep in mind that this is coming from the guy that frames the Green New Deal as socialism and extremist. Remember that the Green New Deal is literally the only legislation, by definition, that addresses the demand from scientists and seeks to do what many other world leaders have already done, to go completely green by 2030 and to put pressure on foreign governments and multinational corporations to stop polluting. The Green New Deal is not extremist. It's the only solution. It's, by definition, the only solution. Anything less would lead to permanent decay of this planet, because that's literally what the Green New Deal says. As in, like, it's literally addressing the exact demands of the scientists. That's not me. That's just because the legislation directly addressed the demands required by 6,500 scientists in the very beginning. If you don't like it, then you don't want to do what 6,500 scientists demand of us. Bill Maher is against that idea and calls it socialism. Of course. Just keep in mind that while we watch this video, because it's pretty relevant, take a look.
EPA Administrator under President Obama and the Director of the Center for Climate Health and the Global Environment at Harvard, Gina McCarthy, is back with us. Gina, how are you? Good. Great to see you again. All right. Well, as someone whose job had been the #1 protector of our environment, these must be very trying days for you. I mean, it's trying days for anyone who picks up the paper. I don't see a headline, but a week goes by that isn't like more alarming than it even was a couple of years ago. First, it was the insect apocalypse. All the insects are dying. Last week, it was the birds. We're killing, I think, 1/3 of all the birds in North America.
Are you doing this just to depress me?
I'm doing it to, well, I want to answer. Yesterday, it was about the oceans. We've made a spit sink out of the oceans, and we can't live on this planet without the oceans. I just want to know, give it to me straight, Doc. Is it too late? Because I know they wouldn't tell us if it was. Because I've read quotes from like James Hansen.
Yeah.
He said in 2006, we have to, in the next 10 years, decrease the growth rate of CO2. If that doesn't happen within 10 years, we're going to pass these tipping points. Al Gore, Inconvenient Truth, the world will reach the point of no return if drastic measures weren't taken to reduce greenhouse gases by 2016. I see we passed 415 parts per million of carbon dioxide. I remember when they said you can't pass 400. So what say you?
Well, what I say is that we have a big challenge ahead, but it's not too late. And I say to you that we have to work together. I can't, by myself, tell you that we're not past tipping points. But if you can't do something about this shit, then stop worrying about it. Let's just do what we can do. There are so many things that we can do. Can't we focus on that? They're good stuff.
I read Al Gore's op-ed in the New York Times last Sunday, and, you know, I didn't realize we actually are so close. We're so close. There's some of the things he points out. As recently as 2014, electricity from solar and wind was cheaper only in about 1% of the world. 5 years later, these are the cheapest sources in 2/3 of the world. We actually are not that far away. Germany gets all of its electricity now from renewables.
And Bill,
Why would Germany get all of its energy from renewables? Do you think that's just because renewable energy is cheap? No, it's because they decided to be world leaders. At this point, almost all of Europe is completely green. You know why? Because they went 100% renewable a long time ago. If the Green New Deal is so socialist and pie in the sky, then why is it that other countries could already do it? Literally, Europe already passed the same kind of legislation, literally the same legislation, except that the deadline was already met. They literally already went 100% renewables. How could they do that? How could they just randomly did that? We're the richest country in the world, and we can't do the things that other countries could do. Some people say, oh yeah, well, Cody, you know, they're smaller countries, right? That's probably the dumbest counter argument I've heard. I hear it all the time, unfortunately. They are smaller countries, but they also generate smaller revenue. They're completely comparable countries out there. Right now, we are doing as good as Brazil. And I'm talking per capita. We got to focus on per capita here, not population, per capita. Smaller countries generate smaller revenue and so forth. And Brazil is not doing anything good right now. So Bill Maher thinks that we should just rely on the development of solar panels to fix the problems, and that everything will be okay because solar panels getting pretty cheap. That's just not true, though. When establishment Democrats want to do everything in their power to make oil cheap and solar panels expensive, it's just not possible. We can't just go green. We could go green, but we don't. Not because renewable energy isn't cheap, but because we make it expensive relative to fossil fuels. Bill, the people that you support are the same people that want renewables to never be cheap. We are the richest country in the world, and we're dead last in the energy race. You know what Al Gore sports? You mentioned Al Gore. He sports the Green New Deal. The problem, Bill, is that many countries are not going green because going green is economically difficult. We can't just let them choose economic growth, though, over our environment. And that's what you're doing, Bill. You're just letting the economy play its thing. That's just not a good idea. We can't just sit by and wait for renewables to be cheap and expect other countries to just follow along. Oil is cheap right now. It's really cheap. Here's the solution. You pressure every multinational corporation. They will be taxed out of their minds and lose 330 million rich customers from the US if they don't obey some standards. The top 100 corporations in the US pollute 70% of global emissions. So just put pressure on them. That's it. You put economic pressure. You threaten to sanction countries that don't meet the standards needed to save the world. Why would that work? And why would that work with multinational corporations? It's the same principle. Well, each country would be forced to choose between the cost of the sanctions or the taxes or the cost of going green. If you make the sanctions really costly, which can currently be done with every single country, if we make sanctions really expensive, then every country will be forced to go green. They'll have to take on that expense instead. That's the solution. It's that easy, Bill. I swear, Bill Maher literally thinks that Germany spontaneously went 100% green. It doesn't work that way, Bill. You can't just do stuff like that. They literally were talking about doing stuff. She literally kept saying, we gotta do stuff. We gotta do something about it. Let's do something. And then they don't talk about what to do. How about you do exactly what the scientists tell us to do? That's it. Like, that's exactly what we should be doing. No, that's not how it works. Of course not. You don't just do stuff and cross your fingers. What you do is you follow the advice of 6,500 scientists. That's what you do. Anything less is quite literally as damning as eliminating the EPA. Oh, that's great. You're an EPA director, former EPA director under Obama. That's awesome. EPA is going to be eliminated if there's no Earth. Bill Maher, gosh, you're so bad.